Hello, everyone. Welcome to this quarter's Real Talk, Real Women, where we have a very open, honest, inclusive conversation around race and relationships amongst women in and out of the workplace. I am trying not to use that word candid because I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like that word is all over my timeline. And so I'm Xing it out. And candid is a good word, but I just feel like it's one of those that's being overly used right now. And so, as per usual, I have an amazing crew of powerhouse women who I love and admire joining me, and I'm going to allow them to say hello. First and foremost, I have my anchor, my partner in this initiative, none other than 2020 Women of Influence herself. We celebrate our friends. Emily Phillips. So, Emily, tell them who you are and what it is that you do.
My name is Emily Phillips, and thank you, Sean, for the gracious introduction. What it is that I do, huh? I spend a lot of time buried in spreadsheets, watching the stock market on a day-to-day basis, helping my investors build a financially independent life. So that's my day job. My all around, other than my day job, is working very passionately with my fellow members at Professional Dimensions. So I just want to give a shout out to our new CEO, Lauren Feaster, on the call tonight. Give her a big round of applause. We're so excited for her to start officially on Monday. So no work questions here yet. And obviously I'm very passionate around economic inclusion and social justice and inclusion and diversity. So that's me in a nutshell. I get yelled at for not sleeping a lot. I hope my wife isn't watching because she probably sleeps a little too much, but I won't get into that. So.
That part, Angie, I wasn't a part of that.
She's at the bar and it's fine. I can get away with it.
Danielle?
Hey, good evening. I'm Danielle Bly. I am the Vice President of Supplier Diversity for WEC Energy Group. For those of you here in the Milwaukee area, that is We Energies, but that also includes WPS in our territory. It also includes our two gas utilities in Michigan and Minnesota, and then also in Chicago, Peoples Gas and North Shore Gas. So I am responsible for ensuring that we have access to small business owners, diverse businesses, minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, service-disabled owned throughout our company, and how we procure services and products. So that is who I am. I'm a wonderful mother of Rashawn and Layla, and the wife of Ramel.
Sherry?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sherry Tron. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Freighter at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and also outside of that, for volunteer time, one of the roles I serve as the co-founder of the Asian advocacy group called Elevasion.
Lauren?
Hi, everyone. I am the outgoing Chief of Staff at Teach for America for a few more days here, and then the incoming CEO of Professional Dimensions. My job is to steward talent, resources, people to make our world the world that we need it to be, the equitable world that we need it to be, and really engage people in that process. So my job is to do whatever my people tell me to do, and I'm happy to do it.
Lauren, just for fun, just say your title one more time. Just go ahead and say your title.
Chief Executive Officer.
Yes, come through. I remember when Danielle got promoted, I was like, for like the first couple months, I was like my executive friend. So now I have multiple executive friends in the corporate space. So proud of all of you and appreciate you being here. So for those of you joining in, I didn't say who I was. I just said hello. So I'm Chantel McKenzie. I'm the CEO and founder of the Power Network. We are a business and marketing consulting firm. We have a full in-house marketing and design studio. We also focus on communication strategy as well as public relations, strategic planning. We work with for-profit and nonprofit entities. I do startup coaching, and I think that's about me in a nutshell. Danielle mentioned her family and Emily, so I'm in trouble. I have a husband. His name is Wesley. And I have 4 children. And so if they're watching, because they do watch my live sometimes, Gabrielle will love this. She's 11, is my favorite 11-year-old. Gotcha. So anyway, last year, Emily and I sat down and we had a conversation about how we could help women create more authentic friendships and relationships and alliances across the color lines. What you see here amongst us women that I have here today is authentic. And so we support one another both publicly and privately. And we just we're friends. We're friends. We're colleagues. We're community partners in making this world a better place. And I'm so proud of all of these women, and I'm proud that I can call each of them and they show up. And I hope that, you know, if they call me, that I show up also. You know, that's the goal. And so that's really how Real Talk Real Women started. And I have really been thinking about this because we had no idea 18 months ago when we started this, that this is what the state of the world would be now. And that this conversation, right? And that a conversation that we started, really a female focused conversation. You know, I was talking to my husband about this, is now the world's conversation to have because of, and it should have been happening, but because of some of the things that have happened in 2020, it's really shed a light on things. And so things have changed, dramatically, due to the pandemic that we're still in the midst of, and how that has shed a light on health disparity and xenophobia and just all the segregation in our country as it relates to so many things. And then you compound that with the fact that so many of us are home and able to see content of actual murders based on racial injustice and race based on nothing else but race. I don't think any of us can get that 8 minutes and 46 seconds of George Floyd's murder out of our head. And then now we're at 152 days since Breonna Taylor's murder. And yet there's still been an arrest. So much has changed. And the conversation was already one that I was passionate and dedicated to, but now it feels like even more of a charge to have it. And so that's how things have changed for me since this has started. I'd like to ask each of you, how have things changed for you in 2020 as it relates to, we can call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. We can talk about, your perspective on it. Sherry, I'll start with you. How have things changed?
Well, I think dealing with the pandemic first and that crisis, it's changed a lot because our work environment, I'm working permanently from home. So it's been an adjustment. My job is a very high touch kind of a job, right? We're working with people and dealing with, issues and it takes a lot of that personal connection. And it's been a little difficult to try to maintain that sense of genuine care and sincerity when you're looking through a computer screen at people. So really, it's been exhausting. I'll admit that. The work that I do around diversity and inclusion is everyone is kind of getting a glimpse at what that's like for everyone now, living in that world, for the last 20 years. And really kind of having to play catch up again with everyone else who's now recognizing all of these issues that we've been talking about forever, now becoming brand new information for them. So it's a lot of, let me take 10 steps back and then walk with you back to from where you are. So it's a lot of rework, but it's really kind of helping exercise patience and understanding to bring people along. So it's been challenging, but definitely valuable. You get energized that there are people that want to take that journey and are interested in actually impacting change. So there's some hope around that I latch onto as well. So yeah, that's been my experience.
I appreciate that. I want to elaborate. You mentioned being the co-founder of Elevation, and definitely when Emily and I set out to have these conversations, we didn't want them to just be black and white, realizing the world is not just black and white, that it's also brown. And so the Asian community was impacted quite a bit when the pandemic hit and really targeted. And so educate people around that and the impact of that on your community.
Yeah, it's one of those constant struggles, I think, for Asian Americans where, we're kind of put into these very opposite kind of buckets, stereotypical buckets, right? Where we're this model minority where we do everything we're told and we're quiet, we don't complain. But then we're also in this other bucket where we're considered perpetual foreigners and can't really be trusted, not really sure, if this, if the reason why this pandemic happened was because of Asians or what, it's just, I think somebody put it really well. They said it's either you're a pet or you're a threat. So it's either one of those dynamics, and it's never really, really seen as, you're a part of this community or this country fully. You're never really fully ingrained as an American. Because there's always that quick, like within a matter of seconds, you can become, go back to being a threat and not really being seen as a part of or included in our community. So that's been, I think, a lot of that awakening for us in the Asian American community, having to deal with that xenophobia, which a lot of us, having been born and raised in this country and all of a sudden being treated like, oh, you must have just flown over from this diseased country and brought this with you, and like, trying to defend ourselves or trying to convince people that no, I'm just as American as you are. And, I am, it's not about, not even scapegoating, countries, but saying, it's not about people and where you're from. It's about being safe and taking care of one another. We're all in this together mentality. So that was a big eye opener for us to really know that we're not really ever completely safe from the impacts of xenophobia and racism.
Thank you for sharing. Lauren, how has 2020 impacted you? How have things changed for you besides being CEO?
Yeah,
we're going to keep saying that.
Yeah. Starting there, I think that's this has been, to me, the biggest test of one of the aspects of systems leadership, which is being able to hold multiple realities, being able to hold really, really intense grief with really, really intense joy. And like that is, it's like you already named, moments like this test like kind of where we are, and either widen a gap or like let us into the realities that have already existed. And I know that it's similar to like the medical world, the education world, and just the adjustments, watching that happen live, watching people find their footing live and deal with that intense like grief, and then almost sometimes feel ashamed about joy, even though joy is revolutionary in itself as well, especially if you're on the other end of the spectrum. And so I think that has been a big part of when I think about like my work and empowering people and being in the realm of like leadership development and coaching. That's been it. I've learned about, we've been exploring like this concept of privilege and mindset that comes with like having the freedom in a moment of crisis, or the ability in a moment of crisis to still focus on your business. That's where you see like the people on top like thriving and people who have been struggling struggle more. And some of that is really like attributed to your ability to like navigate situations without the intense grief if that's not your people. So we were talking about when people were dying, and that started impacting disproportionately my community. People who are like living and still expecting to show up, like losing jobs, not knowing what they're doing with their kid, but still trying to like show up. The freedom that others have to not have to deal with that, to still be thinking about like, well, what am I going to do? How can I like capitalize and build in this moment? And so how do we get people to realize that there are some mindset choices that you can make and still be inspired and still be joyful, while still at the same time holding the grief and the pain and giving people the attention that they deserve and need in those moments. So I think it's really been a test of that. That's been like the big thing. So like CEO and also like 152 days, right? So
that's powerful. Danielle, do you need me to repeat the question? Or you're good.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
It's called Real Talk for a reason, right?
Right.
Facts. Facts.
Right. Because everything I think Sherry and Lauren have already said hit home for me. I'm 6-7 months now into my new role. And so to your point, Lauren, of having that blessing and feeling the joy and excitement around that, also then feeling that the rug was pulled underneath me, 3 months into it, when I really felt like I was just getting my feet wet, and the pandemic hit. And then personally, I had a personal loss. So I lost my mother due to medical issues, and then also COVID. So she tested positive for COVID. It was not the cause of her death, but it definitely contributed. So 2020 has been drama, has been a struggle for me personally. And in the real talk realm of this, I know people see me as the one to inspire, and I have struggled with that because it has been a test of my mental health. And that came to fruition to me within the last 3 weeks. I've shared with someone close to me that I'm usually the one, you show me the darkest hole and I'm finding the light. I let myself get down, and I was struggling to find the light, y'all. I really was. Because I feel like after my mother passed, I stopped grieving her, and I immediately started grieving the world, and started grieving for my community, started grieving for the weight I hold at work for the other employees that look up to me, and African-American employees, and, wanting to be a voice, knowing I cannot be the voice for everybody. I have to be my own. Right. So it was kind of struggle personally, but being able to at least acknowledge that that's where I was. I'm better today. And then knowing that I really have to be mindful going forward, because I am so many things to so many people. First and foremost, a wife, a mother, and a sister, and all of that. So I have to be very mindful going forward.
Right. Right. Oxygen mask, as Emily and I we probably send each other a text to say that at least 5 times a week. A day. And we know we don't have to say anything else but oxygen mask. And Danielle, we love you. And I think, Lauren, what you said was so pivotal in that balance of that intense joy and that intense grief. And as leaders, we do feel guilty if we take a moment to have a moment, and if we are not running at top speed. But there are things that happen in our life that can stop us in our tracks, and it's okay to not be okay and to have that moment. Emily, 2020.
Loaded question. I'm a little reflective today, especially because it's my 7-year anniversary at Baird as an advisor.
Congratulations.
The industry has an incredibly high attrition rate. I think it's something like 95 or 98%, especially if you come in as an outsider, so not joining a family practice. So today, every year when my anniversary comes up, I always do my best to keep my schedule clear, and I'm going to do a day for me. And every year it doesn't always work that way. So I need to get a little bit better about discipline. But one thing I did do was I secured time with Joanna Brooks this late afternoon, and I went down to the lakefront and I practiced yoga with her. And it was during that time that I felt a lot of what you're talking about, Danielle. When you're in the hustle, whether you're working from home or, out and about, you tend to, if you're a driver, right? Like everyone on this call, you're just boom, 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 one thing after another, and you're carrying all that. And usually it's something pretty traumatic that makes you pause, right? And sometimes, even if it's not traumatic, just even taking yoga. I've not taken yoga, and I used to do it 4 times a week, and I've not done it since Embody Yoga shut down. And I didn't realize everything I was carrying, right? Like halfway through the practice, I was like, I can't that's not working. And I had to stop and regroup. And I just started thinking about the last couple months, and I started thinking about, a lot of my friends who are doing a lot of the I&D work. They've been doing it like you, Sherry. And now there's even more pressure on them right now because it's in vogue. And now all the executives want all the They want all the tricks. They want it to work, yesterday. And, I had the pleasure of talking to one of our good friends, Cecilia Gore, this week, talking about the Ideation Summit. I saw that, talking about the Professional Dimensions Ideation Summit. And we were sharing how important the journey of inclusion and diversity is really just around leadership, and how that starts within, and how challenging it is to get people and companies to understand that starts within. So you ask me, like, how is 2020? It's been such a blur in a lot of ways, because, as you know, at the beginning of COVID, there was an oil crash. The market went south quickly. I was sick for 2 weeks in bed, and we've been just slammed, and kind of coming out of it now as people are starting to go back to school. I've had some time to hit the pause button and really think about things, and I'm nervous. I'm really nervous about how we take the most advantage of this time, because we really get one shot to take advantage of this attention and the pouring of resources that is going into this conversation. And I'm nervous that if we don't really get the attention and get our executive leadership to really take a journey within to understand how to make some of these changes, I'm afraid it's that real change is a lot farther off than it could be. So 2020 has been enlightening. It's been a lot. It's been painful watching a lot of my friends go through this. But I continue to get my cat off screen and also just be the best friend I can be, and use my voice where I am able, and my resources where I am able.
Absolutely.
That's good. So one of the things I didn't mention is we said we were going to have this conversation, Power Network Style, or I said that in a post. Power Network Style is that we don't do all the talking, that you guys are involved in the conversation. So there's a ticker going across the bottom of the screen, and you can ask us anything, relating to the topic at 414-788-4205, or relating to something that one of us has said. You can direct it to all of us. You can direct it to someone in particular. Even if I have your number in my phone, I am not going to be like, and so asked. It will stay anonymous. And it just adds a lot more interesting layers to the conversation. So I've got my phone right here if anybody wants to text, but we'll just keep talking until you do. Emily, there's something that you said that has been a thought of mine also, about there's only been a few moments, I feel like, in the history of our country where we've had this type of attention on race relations and change. And to your point, if we don't really get the people who really have the power to make the changes, to realize that they have to change from within in order, as leaders, in order for the masses to change, then we really could miss a pivotal time in history. And so I'd love to hear, we'll start with you, Sherry, as someone especially that has been working in this field for so long. What kind of conversations do you recommend anyone watching or we have to help someone because there's a lot of people fearful of what that looks like. Fearful first and foremost, because then I have to acknowledge that either I have benefited from or I am contending with the issues that are perpetuating this system that is not just broken, it's actually working in the way it was intended. It needs to be thrown out and rebuilt. And so,
right.
So how would you recommend we start that conversation? Because I come in contact with a lot of people like that.
Yeah, and I think part of what I think Emily was saying, that this is a really unique and pivotal time that we have to take advantage of, right? I mean, everyone's listening, everyone's paying attention, people are asking for this kind of information. So I think it's definitely the time to really ask for everything and really, make things happen. Now is the time to do it. So having these brave conversations, even as tough as it may be for some people, they're willing to do it, at least try, and so we have to kind of make it It's going to be uncomfortable, but I think if they're willing to take that first step, this can lead to so much more dialogue that has to happen that we've been waiting to have for so long, right? So it's a catalyst to that that dialogue. So things that we have to focus on now is not just there's personal reflection and change, but also the systemic changes that have to happen too, because you can't change behavior and still operate within a system that perpetuates oppression, right? So really working on both and helping people understand that sometimes it's not just about what you can do, but what we need to change as a system in order to make things happen. You can kind of get them on board with some of that, where they can see how it's more than just them. They feel like this weight that they have to fix everything. We've had those conversations with our leaders. We encourage our leaders to have these conversations with their teams and just check in and make sure everyone's okay. And they're like, they're paralyzed because they feel like, as a leader, I should have all the answers and I should be able to fix something. And they don't know how, so they don't even try. We're trying to create this environment where it's safe to speak up, even if you may be wrong, or it's not just a speak up culture, but a listen up culture where we'll hear each other, right? So it's that opportunity to really create that space where we can have these conversations and not have to worry about whether we'll be perceived as being difficult or being if I may seem at odds with what you might believe. That's people are afraid to have that conflict. We're very conflict averse, especially in the Midwest. On top of everything going on right now, we want to be liked. We want to be seen as good people. And if I have a differing opinion based than you might not like me, or you might think I'm a bad person. And that's terrifying for a lot of specifically white people are afraid of that, right? So it's trying to create that space where, no, it's okay to think differently. I want to hear what your experience is, and then you can hear what my experience is. It's kind of creating that dialogue, that space for that.
Right. And it's honestly the only way to move the needle. I said during Emily's conversation, Lead Like an Ally, and I took this from the Chelsea Handler Netflix special where she was discussing her white privilege, and someone in the room that she was in to learn about the experience of African Americans said, this is not about just creating safe spaces, it's about creating brave spaces. And I immediately adopted that as a mantra about, I'm going to create brave spaces. But I also am reading a book that talks about, as leaders, our tendency to have perfectionist syndrome. And I think you just hit the nail on the head with that. And most leaders, especially executives that I talk to, it's like they do feel like help. Like, what do I do? Okay, I sent an email, I sent a letter, I had a picnic, I did okay, I called them all, and now what? And so, Lauren, you coming in, and you've worked for so many diverse organizations, but you're stepping into this new role, into this generational, varying levels of professional women. And so, when you think about that conversation, and I'm really interested too, because you're like a year younger than me, and so I
right.
you're supposed to laugh. That was supposed to be funny, like you're only a year.
I laugh hard.
Right. I know you laugh. That's not the point. She was
too hard.
So, from your perspective, how do you encourage the brave conversation now within the organization?
I'll say one thing that I think sometimes we overlook is the fact that what we'd be asking people or executives to do towards the direction of being anti-racist are things that you would want to do to be a good manager, to be a good leader, to be a good human, to have good character. These aren't it's not this new level of knowledge that's just you just weren't born with, that you've never experienced. And so I think sometimes there's a language barrier where it's I'm hearing all these things, and when I'm around, and as an executive, you're worried about looking good, like you said, and not saying the right thing. And when people are worried about saying a thing, someone was talking about that, and I'm maybe that worry is you shouldn't be saying a thing, you should be elevating things that are already said. And just like this isn't that foreign. I think sometimes we treat it as if it's like, okay, there's been years and decades of oppression, and like we can never dig ourselves out of this. But like the danger of it being part of a system is that like systems move whether we're conscious of them or not. And so like there's that danger of like the unconscious things that are happening that we all perpetuate, that we're all guilty of because we're all part of the system.
Right.
We're all in it. We're all alive here. We're all here on this call. And so you kind of have to get over that piece of seeing it as like I'm worried because now I'm gone, but now I'm so far gone. But just like systems are built, destroyed by people, and I think learning how to speak, which is what I want to leverage in my role, is like learning the synonyms, the different ways that we talk about these things, to help bring people along and show folks like you're very capable of this. It's just a matter of pausing and being conscious. And some people call that like conscious leadership. And there's just so many frameworks I've seen that all kind of to me point to the same DEI like spirit. And then it gets into a lot because equity, moving from even understanding equality versus equity, is a simple conversation about justice, which is like a fundamental principle in character. So like I think understanding how these are all interrelated, and that it's actually not as big. Like it's big, but it also can be, it can be broken down into like bite-sized parts, and I'm committed to those bite-sized parts for people.
That's awesome. So we got some questions now. So Emily, I'm gonna ask this of you, and then Danielle, I want you to answer the same question. So someone asked that at some point there might be, potentially will be, backlash to today's feeling of potential for change. How do we prepare for that? And in addition, they agree with you, Sherry, that now is the time. So how do we prepare for the potential future backlash of this moment that's happening and today's, feeling for change?
I guess I'm a little confused on specifically just around what backlash means. Is that like white people rising up, getting frustrated,
so.
Like feeling left
if
out?
I have to interpret it, feel free to text more color to person who texts. But, I would think, you think about EEOC, you think about, some of the other things that were done to exactly. And so it was all yay, kumbaya, and then all of a sudden it was like this thing of, well, you get a job easier, you get into school easier because of this, affirmative act, So that's the kind of backlash I would see.
Well, I would contend that it's not potential. I'd contend that it's already happening. I just pay attention to the election and the rhetoric around the election. I would also contend that let's prepare for it. My attitude when I talk to people who are frustrated that their kids don't get into certain schools and they're upset because they think someone got promoted because of the color of their skin or whatever it is. To me, I've always been a competitive human, and I think that the more we open up the system and redesign it to really allow people who work hard and who have a chance at actually achieving results given their talents and what they bring to the table, like I welcome that environment. So when I'm getting a little feedback, sorry. Can other people hear that?
Yes, I can.
You're good. Go ahead, Emily. Hey. What do we hear?
You don't hear it? It's way weird. Oh, so it's us. It's like okay, is it gone?
I think it's gone.
It's gone.
So just in short, I think it's here, and I think we need to prepare. I think we need to especially white people need to be able to combat that dialogue and discussion anytime they're present. It's always going to be around. Anytime anybody feels like their power or the market that they've cornered is jeopardized, they're going to complain and they're going to react and act out on it. And to me, I don't know that I can change it or eliminate it, but it's unjust, it's incorrect. And if you can't get a job because other people who are more qualified and more talented than you are getting jobs because we've actually redesigned a system to work for everyone, then like I don't feel bad for you at all. And how do you combat, like how do you counter argue that? How do you justify your position? So I just think we prepare and we do the best we can to know that it's here and it's coming, and best educate our spheres of influence and people who are just beginning this journey, because we need them in order to really create change.
Danielle.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it might be John's mic that's giving. Yeah.
Talk, Danielle.
You want me to take a stab at answering that question?
Please.
So I agree with you, Emily. I think definitely prepare. But I think that's been the blessing in this process, is the conversations that I've been having, right? And I go back to what you all were stating earlier. This is an individual journey first. And for all of us, I just think, if there's the momentum we have, we can't take our foot off the pedal. So backlash or not, we have an opportunity to take advantage of that momentum, but keep pushing. And keep pushing in a way that's strategic, in a way that makes sense in the sphere that you control, right? Whether, we're operating within a women's organization, in your company, you name it, we have opportunities to do things in a strategic way, in a way that makes sense, that backlash or not, we keep pushing forward. I guess that's how I would answer that question.
Well, and getting together and like you said, strategy, right? Like, so if we know that healthcare and education and housing are some of the challenges, like how do we gather together and get more people in positions of power so that, let the backlash occur. But if we reduce the power and their influence, like we have to create change.
Mm-hmm.
I love John's comment, right? Like, how does a fighter prepare to be hit? Like, we know it's here, we know it's coming. So let's just outsmart them. Not going to be very hard. The hard part is actually grabbing control of the power, right? And that's what we have to get really fierce, unrelenting, and unapologetic about it.
And changing the things that are systemically wrong right now. That's going to help fight backlash too.
Right. And you guys said, like, the backlash has always been there. What hasn't been there was this will to change. Like this leadership support is something that's kind of new right now, like this focus, this hyper focus. So that's what's different now. That's what we have to focus on, is that the door that's open, not the ones that are always shut.
Well, it's no longer okay to just cover it up, right? Like Starbucks, there was a major reaction, right? Like you're seeing prices and share price react to these things. Like it's no longer okay. Like societally, there has been a shift in what is generally accepted, and like, oh, well, he's just a good guy. Really? No, because he grabbed my skirt and now he's going to get fired. The Me Too movement had a major shift, right? And you just have to continue to prepare and take advantage of these moments and get after it. We do, not you. We. Sean, are you in the Netherlands?
Text everybody, sound is gonna fix it.
Do you want to maybe just throw in some of the questions in the private chat? We can pick those up.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Better.
Okay. Yep. And better? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So question for Sherry. What would you recommend for someone who has spoken up and then becomes the target of retaliation and further discrimination?
Well, I mean, from an HR perspective, retaliation is illegal, right? So, I mean, there's recourse available for a person if they are truly retaliated against. But like when you speak up and, you get, beat down, I mean, it's an opportunity to grow from that, right? You can't let that stop you. Like you're making those analogies about a fighter. I think, you talked about that. You keep getting back up, right? It's about getting back up and knowing that it's worth, having those setbacks and having that pushback. It's worth it because what you're working towards is going to be a benefit to everyone, and it's worth that. It's worth that risk of possibly getting, pushback from people. If you continue to fight that fight, people start to listen a little bit more, like you're not giving up, you're continuing to talk about it, you're continuing to push that envelope. Eventually any forward progress is progress, right? Even if it's a little bit. So I just, again, just that HR trigger from my background goes up when you hear the words retaliation, right? So,
right, exactly. So next question is that someone said that they believe white fragility is often most seen in white liberals. Do we agree, and how do we best challenge that? Who wants to jump in on that?
I do agree. I think some of the biggest challenging conversations. I have had really challenging conversations with very liberal, democratic, like emblazoned insignia on their chest, and they are like running through the neighborhood trying to save Black people, and it's like, just hold up a second. There's going back to my conversation earlier this week, Cecilia said something really, really powerful. In order for people to be allies, right, or accomplices, you have to take off this sort of approach that you're doing it for someone, because you're doing it for yourself, right? Like, you're not happy with the system that you designed, and you're the one whose job it is to dismantle it. And I think that we catch, I don't know if it's more so liberals versus conservatives, at least sometimes with conservatives that were a little bit more blatant in their opinions, whereas there's like a little bit of an undertone or something that's in the white liberal circle. I mean, just look at the challenges with the Democratic Party in the state of Wisconsin. Like, they've not been able to figure things out for the last 10 years, since 2011 when the Tea Party took over, right? So I do agree that there's some challenges there, but I'm also optimistic because there's been a lot of listening. I don't know if they're as advanced as a listen up culture as Sherry has talked about, but there has been some openness to re-educating themselves. So.
Right. And I think that comes from, especially, when I think about the white liberals that I've had very impassioned conversations with, it goes back to what we always talk about, of that acknowledgement of me benefiting from the system, even if I don't feel like, I didn't own slaves. I've never, called someone a derogatory statement. I've never used a racial slur. However, there has to be this acknowledgement of, you are still benefiting from a system that is oppressing other people, and it is very appreciated that you are running through the neighborhood trying to save the Black people. Even though I don't know if we asked whoever it is to save us, but but however. It's like, still there needs to be a sit down and talk about, unconscious bias and about, what real change. And we've had this conversation with Real Talk. Who's in your home? Who's on your team? Who are you friends with? Where are you working?
Just because you move to Shorewood and not Elm Grove doesn't make you like an advocate and constantly fighting the good fight. Like, and it's just that whole thing of like, it's not a badge, right? It's not a woke badge. You're not going to put it on the sash of how to be an accomplice. And that I think is again, going back to the piece of journeying within, right? What are you comfortable with? Like, white people have had to sit down and really think and audit their philosophies, their actions, who they spend time with, where they spend their money, who's your attorney, who's your financial advisor, where do you get your all of it, right? Like, everything. And if you look at that list and it's pretty homogenous,
Mhm.
Ask yourself some pretty serious.
And I would say, yeah, and Jasmine Johnson's on the call, and shout out to her for being a huge proponent of recycling the Black dollar for so many years. Because I will say that African Americans, I see more of us being more conscious of how we spend our dollar with one another and wanting to help the commerce and the economics within our community ourselves. And I'm so proud of that. And it is, we don't own any airlines and we don't own any automobile companies yet as African Americans. However, there is this push within the African American community to keep our dollar in the community under the hope that we can help ourselves. So that goes back to that running through the street trying to save us. Just know that we've been trying to save ourselves. We are trying to save ourselves. So it's not that there are not Black leaders in place that are not trying to do the work also. Okay.
So, Sean, can I add to that real fast?
Yes, go ahead.
I had a conversation recently with a white friend who, what I share with her is that I can't blame you for being a product of your environment. I am a product of the environment I come from. I had to deal with that with my parents, right? My parents were born in the 40s, 50s, lived through the 60s, from the South, from Mississippi. So their perspective and view of life very different than mine growing up here in Milwaukee, 70s, 80s, 90s, and now. But so I can't blame you for being a product of your environment. But now that you recognize that, to Emily's point, what do you do about it? If you grew up in an area that was very homogeneous and you weren't around Black people, your circle is all white, what are you going to do about it? And that's the point where I can decide how to deal with you, right? As a person, as a friend, if you don't make choices that are fitting, that are inclusive, then that we go forward. I can't blame you for what you did before, and I think so many white people that I have talked to feel so guilty about that. And it's hard to surface it and talk about it and admit to it. That's something that's part of that individual journey, to Emily's point, that has to be dealt with. And that's not easy. I get that.
Right. And to Emily's point too, when she said it's not a badge, right, that you earn. And also it's not a badge you can give yourself. That allyship isn't, you can't call yourself an ally. Somebody else needs to call you an ally, right? I mean, that's something that you have to earn, that you can't just proclaim I'm an ally and just, get the badge, right?
Yeah. Sherry just she just preached, as they would say it, like that. She just preached with that. So Lauren, I'm gonna give you the next question. Someone asked that cancel culture. Think about Starbucks. We canceled them. Black Twitter is quick to cancel people. I'm always talking to Emily about Black Twitter. Like, it's this philosophical world that we really have. And it said cancel culture is becoming a dog whistle for those against the movement towards equality. What do you think about cancel culture and the backlash against perceived cancel culture? What are your thoughts about that?
Cancel culture. Cancel culture, it can be dangerous. I understand it. I just would say that it can be dangerous because we're much more complex than a black and white anything. And I think cancel culture calls for us to be black or white. And it doesn't, I shouldn't say dangerous generally. It's dangerous, I think, towards the end of learning, which to me, that's my bet on how we change the world, on how we get to a more equitable world is through learning. And you can learn that from basic education practices. When people feel excluded or feel shut down, or the danger with fragility is not actually feeling guilty or feeling or having that fragility. It's the fact that it paralyzes action, or it makes you unable to take in more, or it closes your mind. And I think anything that closes your mind to a different reality, or doesn't allow you to be a learner is dangerous. And I feel like cancel culture can do that. So that's the reason why I say I say it's a little dangerous towards progress. But yeah, that's my take on it.
That's a great answer.
I don't think cancel culture works for real in real life, though. Not in my perspective, right? I can't go to work and just cancel, a peer that I got to see every day. I mean, you can probably cancel somebody in many ways, but I think it's easy to do on social media. It's easy to, put something out there and say you're walking away from it, but going to Starbucks and hoping nobody saw you or whatever. Right? But at the same time, though, where do we give people or companies, you think about the statements that companies have put out around solidarity and being for the movement. Now people are looking for those tangible actions, right? Behind these statements. So I think in the same with anything, where do you give people or companies the opportunity to show and prove before we fully cancel? It's kind of like, I don't know. I think we need to be more thoughtful. And to Lauren's point, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Danielle, completely, because it's like so reflexive. Like it's happened so quickly. I mean, the way our environments, everything is so out there. The news is like immediate, and people react to it immediately without any full story, without getting the full background. And all of a sudden, something's been canceled, and stocks dropped already, and that's like within an hour, right? And I think with like you said, with the cancel culture, people are really just looking for something to do, something actionable. That they can say, well, I did this, and now I feel good that I haven't gone to Starbucks, so I get my badge.
And what's the motivation, right? Yeah. So a company does something wrong, and now you're going to cancel them, and we're going to act out like supporting them. But what are you asking them for? Like these companies aren't going to go away, right? Like Target screwed up by not opening up their store for some of the protesters, right? And then they put out a big statement, and then they said they were going to do all these things. But like, you're going to cancel Starbucks. Yeah, they screwed up, but what are you asking them to do to fix it, right? Like, it's like bringing a problem to the front and then not asking for a solution or talking about what you want to be done to change, right? So back to your point, Sherry, it's like, oh, I want my moment in the sun. So I'm going to say like Starbucks is the worst and I'm never going to go there again. And then I'm going to post all these super cool pictures of these homemade lattes and all these Instagram things. Like, that's not really action, right? Like, what are you really asking for?
Yeah, and I think it's great. Cancel culture does have a positive piece though, because it is a way that people can feel empowered to do something, right? But it's also like misdirected empowerment. Like they don't have the right channels of empowerment, so they're
incomplete
doing something else, right? I mean, that just kind of goes to show there isn't a good channel for them to express their voice and channel their action.
I will say that there are some things that are so blatantly egregious that some companies have done that I think about and it call it tone deaf, call it there's always an excuse of why it happened, of they didn't know, they didn't realize it would be insulting. I think about H&M putting that young black man in a shirt with a monkey on it, which is very insulting to many, if not most, African Americans. And I will just say, and I'm just sitting here as we're talking, thinking about this subconsciously, I have not walked in H&M since then, and so, and I haven't, because I was just insulted, to my core. There's things that, when there is blatant discrimination like that, I have a hard time coming back personally. So agreed about the balance and adjustment. My executive coach is watching, John Haynes, and definitely I am not an advocate of saying this company messed up and so it's over for them, forever. However, some things it's like, I can't in good conscience spend my money with you based on what you've shown me that your belief system is. And especially when it's happened multiple times. And so that's really, it's tough. It's tough. We've got a few, go ahead.
Danger, I think also with cancel culture, because there are absolutely benefits to like the strategic cancellation of like specific actions. But I think canceling also doesn't get specific enough. It's like when you give someone feedback and you just say like, they swing and they miss the ball, and you just say like, don't do it like that. Like stop swinging. But like there's elements of like, where were you? Like, did you swing too early? Like, it's just sometimes with cancel culture, it doesn't allow us space to get very specific about the action that was done that we want to not have happen again. And it's like you're throwing away the whole thing.
Yeah, no room for learning.
Side that you're not that you're also losing in that, which to me that other side sometimes is the relationship that would actually allow for a system to change.
Right.
Yeah. And I am looking for that actionable change. I'm looking for that action, to your point, Emily. Like it's like I'm looking for that actionable change, and Starbucks, I mean, that, how that threw me, because I mean, this is the same company, and it just shows what happens when you have a shift in leadership that shut down their whole operation, due to a prior issue around race, and then here we are with this issue, and so it's a tough one. I'm trying to move because we got 6 minutes and we got questions. Okay, so and someone asked, many of you ladies, including you, and I assume since you text me, you mean me, experience being the one and only in your careers, African American, yes, face of the race. As someone who is potentially stepping into a new place of leadership where the seat I may be taking is a result of employees in an organization calling an organization out for their lack of progress, what are some of the tactical steps any of you have taken to ensure your peers and superiors respect your role in the company while gaining the trust of those who are already distrustful of the company? It makes sense to me. So as someone who's been in that position, I perform. I know my stuff. I mean, that's really like, I perform in such a way that it gets to a point that I would hope that it's like, well, man, why didn't we have her here sooner? And then as far as understanding the lay of the land and how new, uncomfortable, the resistance that may come with me stepping into this space that a woman of color have never stepped into before. You know, I mean, I also come in, if you're going into a leadership position, having those personal conversations, letting people get to know me in a way that we level set and earning their and hopefully earning their respect and giving respect. And so it's not easy depending on the company and the culture of the company. And I would say, remove from your mind that you were placed in that position based on the company's lack of progress, because you earned it, and move like you earned it. Anybody else want to add to that?
I agree with you totally, Sean. I would say perform is key, and networking, right? Getting to know the people that work for you, especially because I think there can be that immediate, issue with trust sometimes, new leadership. Don't be afraid to learn from people that work for you. That's something I learned on very early in my career, and I feel like it has been very beneficial to me since then. Is that it breaks down that barrier of trust when I don't walk in expecting to know it all. I can learn from everybody around me. And when people see that is so helpful, and when you walk away better for it. So I second everything you say, but it's the network, it's the learning from other people, and performing will help in that regard.
That's good.
Agreed.
And Lauren, Sherry, have you found yourself in that position where you were the first?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely not a lot of Asian Americans in corporate America at leadership levels, even less than many other minority groups. So there's definitely, it's usually I'm the only one. And being in my role too, you're always having to prove that you know what you're doing. But I think in order to overcome that, like imposter syndrome, we always talk about that too, is to, again, performance is one, but also getting that trust and building those relationships, because nothing changes behavior in minds like personal experience, right? So the more people you can have or give personal experiences with you, that get to know you, that builds that relationship, builds those bonds, builds that trust. And then, I think you're like Danielle was great in saying, just knowing what you can learn from others and having that humility, not going in there saying like, I know what I'm doing. I know exactly, like being open to learning creates that trust too, because people, will take you seriously and know that you're open to being a team player in that group too. So it's not like you're fighting on your own, throughout that. You have allies, and you can build those accomplices and those, endorsers around you.
This is the last one we'll take. Yes. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
I was just saying I agree.
No. Okay, good. Emily, someone said that feeling stuck in guilt over the past is an excuse for not taking responsibility for the future. I think that's a good way to end this, and I would love to hear your comment around that, because I think that's a strong statement that a lot of people they feeling stuck in guilt over the past has definitely been an excuse for not taking responsibility for change for the future.
I subscribe to when you know better, do better. In life, period, right? You know, you make mistakes when you're 15, when you're 17, when you're 25, when you're 38. And, you know, years later, you're like, oh, I cannot believe I did those things, right? But you know better, you do better. And you have a choice anytime you go through any adversity or a learning experience to really take advantage of the lesson and implement that lesson moving forward. So feeling guilty or feeling stuck is a choice. And I'm not diminishing an emotional reaction, right? I mean, people's perceptions and feelings are their own, and that is generally their reality. But being the stuck part is what I guess I really challenge folks, because you have a choice every day to, you know, get out of bed, however that is, right? With assistance or without assistance, you have a choice in the actions that you take. And so if you're feeling guilty, I would implore you to sit quietly, to follow that feeling and figure out what is it that's driving it and motivating it, and to really get really close in understanding where the source of that is. Because once you have a better understanding of yourself and why you're feeling a certain way, you can then put the right types of resources into play to better educate yourself so that you're equipped to not be stuck and to move forward. There's zero excuse for you to be stuck. I understand it can take time. I'm not expecting you to be an expert tomorrow, but all of us have a choice to move forward and be a part of a solution. And I will volunteer myself if people have challenges, you know, or are nervous, or they don't want to make mistakes. Like, I get that, but we have energy, and all we need is to add intention. And so I would really challenge somebody to get unstuck so that they can really find the path that will take them to a place that doesn't necessarily absolve you of guilt, but the life you occupy doesn't reflect how you may be feeling today.
I would quickly add, if you can't get there yourself, there are professionals who can help you too, right?
And then, you know, go ahead. I'm sorry, Sherry.
I was just gonna say, like,
being stuck
is privilege, and I hope that people understand that. Like, being able to not act or being able to stop and reflect is a privilege that a lot of people don't have. And
there you go.
Maybe that's being guilty. Like, sit in that reality too, that a lot of people don't get the time to just say, like, wait, I'm not going to answer that question because I'm still processing, like, slavery, for example. Like, I'm still processing, so I'll get back. I'm feeling a way, so I'll get back to you. Like, there's a lot of privilege in that, and so I love the action, putting the intention behind that energy and that feeling there.
Yeah, I like to remind people
looking all over
that
my desk for. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was looking all over my desk for a mic to drop with what Lauren said. I don't have one, but it was just like
she was preaching.
Okay, I got it. Right. Go ahead,
I always remind people that if they feel guilty or they're feeling uncomfortable, that's empathy that they're feeling. You know, that not to forget that there's empathy in there, that feeling of guilt, and to embrace that and move with that.
That's a great
point.
Well,
thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone that watched. Thank you for everyone that took part of the conversation in the comments. Please share this video. We will be back next quarter. Thank you to my partner in World Domination for Good, Emily Phillips. Thank you, Sherry, Lauren, Danielle. I consider it an honor to know all of you ladies. And, you know, this will continue. This has to continue, because people are always like, why are there so many conversations? Because honestly, they have to happen for change to happen, and collaboration is so key. And so we will continue to have the conversation and put the action behind it. So there's always homework. The homework is to find someone who does not look like you, who may be a different color, have a different socioeconomic background, different education level, whatever it is. And I know it's COVID, so I can't tell you to go have coffee. You can have coffee via Zoom, or you can do something to make a connection with someone you would not normally find yourself connected with, because that is really where it starts, to the point of every answer that's been given has come back to authentic connections. All right.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, y'all.
Bye.